Chapter 9, we're going to be looking at the Progressive Era. And the origins of progressivism, basically there's 4 goals. The first is that we're going to try and protect social welfare. The second is to promote moral improvement, so making people behave better. The third is to create economic reform. And the fourth is to foster efficiency, to make us work better, more efficiently. So, with those 4 goals in mind, the progressive era and the progressive thinkers are going to be working towards making those happen. So, for number 1, of protecting social welfare, we're going to try and relieve urban problems, some of those problems of urbanization that we looked at with immigration coming in. One of the things that's going to be created is the YMCA, which is the Young Men's Christian Association. And the YMCA is going to open up libraries, they'll sponsor classes, they build swimming pools and handball courts in order to provide activity and education and help for those urban areas that were really suffering. Another group is the Salvation Army, and the Salvation Army will open up soup kitchens and nurseries. They also create what's called slum brigades, and these slum brigades are going to convert poor immigrants to basically show them the value of hard work and temperance. And temperance is like reducing or doing things in moderation where you're not going above and beyond what you need. So like temperance is like not spending so much money, saving some, not getting drunk. You know, you can have a drink, but don't go out and get drunk. That kind of thing, that you're moderating how much you do. So we'll see reformers come in that are going to help protect this social welfare, like Florence Kelley. And Florence Kelley is going to create settlement houses, kind of like Jane Addams. And she's going to help try to improve the lives of women and children. And she is going to work to prohibit child labor and also to limit women's working hours because they were needed at home to help raise the kids. To deal with number 2, which is promoting moral improvement, trying to improve personal behavior for people. One of those things is going to be prohibition, and prohibition we'll talk more about in a couple units, but banning of alcoholic beverages. And this starts out as a state initiative of getting people to limit their alcoholic intake. And so the states, usually county by county, are going to pass some sort of prohibition of alcohol. It's really highly promoted by the WCTU, which is the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And remember, temperance is moderation, cutting back. And the WCTU is going to enter into saloons where alcohol is sold, and they will go in and they'll sing and they'll pray, and they urge the owners to stop selling alcohol. And actually, this group ends up being the largest women's group in history because so many women were a part of it. But they also do a lot of other things other than working towards prohibition. They also open kindergartens for immigrant children. They visit inmates in prison and asylum, and they work for women's suffrage as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that they're involved in. Another group is the Anti-Saloon League, and the Anti-Saloon League, its members are going to attack saloons because they're anti-saloon, and this is going to anger a lot of immigrants because saloons not only provided alcohol, but they also provided inexpensive meals, and they also cashed paychecks without a fee attached, like a bank would normally attach a fee. And they also provided rooms for special occasions, like if you had a birthday party or if you had a wedding reception, the saloon would oftentimes provide that as well. So it wasn't just an alcoholic establishment. They also provided other services. And so a lot of immigrants were unhappy with this because that's where they went. This was cheap locations for things, and cheap meals, and you're able to get your paychecks cashed rather than go to a bank. So it kind of dug into some of those other things that the saloons provided. Number 3 was to create economic reform, and so it's going to question the American capitalistic economic system. Is it really the best system for us? They're going to criticize the laissez-faire theory, and laissez-faire is the belief that government should leave the economy alone. And so there's a lot of people who felt maybe the government needs to be more highly involved and providing regulation and all that kind of stuff. There will be some groups who are going to promote socialism, and socialism is an economy based on government ownership of like business and property, and really believes in the equal distribution of wealth, that you don't have a rich and a poor class, everybody's middle class kind of idea. And so you will have groups like the muckrakers, and the muckrakers are journalists who are going to write about the corrupt side of business. They're really going to show like how bad business can be and how it skims off the top, and how it pays workers such a low wage when they can afford to pay them better. So these muckrakers kind of really stir up the pot quite a bit. Number 4 is fostering efficiency and trying to increase the efficiency of American society. One of the things that they're going to look at and promote is called scientific management. And this is an effort to increase efficiency in the workplace by applying scientific principles in order to make tasks simpler and easier. The problem with this is that science kind of relies on consistency. So, like, if you're going to use scientific principles, it helps if you have people who work at the same pace, at exactly the same pace, or doing the same thing in the same way. But in most jobs, not everybody. So one of the problems is that some people work faster than others. Well, that's really hard to measure that then. It's really hard to figure out, okay, what can I expect? So scientific management really tends to focus on having people work like machines and being precise. Well, humans tend to err, so it doesn't always work out right. But it's going to lead to more assembly lines where each person does one little bit of the job and then passes it off to the next person. So that's kind of the direction it heads into. But it also leads to an increase in injuries because people are expected to do this really, really quickly. And that's a problem because if you're not paying attention to what you're doing and instead focusing on the time that you're doing it in, you get injured and then you lose your job if it's an injury that's going to keep you out of your job for a while. So you get a lot of injury and a lot of turnover rate in your workers as well. So then you got to train somebody. And so while the idea is to lead to efficiency, it doesn't actually work out all that well. So another thing that they're going to work on, progressive era, is cleaning up the government. And that includes economics as well. Trying to protect workers. Businesses hire children. And a lot of children, we learned, got jobs because it helped to contribute to their family income and all that kind of stuff. But children you could hire for lower wages, and they can handle those small parts and tools a lot better than adults could. And so children were a part of that family economy, especially among immigrants who weren't getting paid very much anyway. But the problems of this is that these children are going to develop health problems. A lot of them end up being underweight. It stunts their growth. And in some of these jobs, they end up with a curvature of the spine, which means that they're not growing properly. Some of them end up with respiratory diseases because of working in dirty, not well ventilated factories. A lot of them get in accidents that are going to cause physical injury. They also get really tired, and they pick up bad habits as well, like smoking and drinking and cursing. So it's not really preparing them for getting a good job later on. They're kind of going to be stuck in the same job for their whole life. So the government wants to limit working hours, and so we will see a couple of Supreme Court cases that come about. The first one is Mueller versus Oregon, and in this case, the Supreme Court is going to side with Mueller, and it says that a state could legally limit the number of working hours for women. So they could say women can only work 20 hours a week, or they can only work 30 hours a week. But the state can make that determination. The second case is Bunting versus Oregon. And this is going to mandate 10-hour work days for men, that you can't force them to work 12-hour days. They can only work a 10-hour day. They also will gain workers' compensation for families of workers if the workers were killed or hurt on the job. So if you get killed or are hurt on the job, your family could get some compensation to help make ends meet. So that was kind of a bonus. Women in public life are also going to see some changes. Women, because they were a part of the workforce, felt that they also should be able to get more rights that are equal to men. For farm women, their roles really don't change much. They tend to be doing the same thing that they were doing 50 years ago, doing those domestic tasks and helping the menfolk when needed on the farm. But it's in the cities where we're going to see a lot of changes taking place, especially for domestic workers. And these are people like maids and cooks and laundresses and sewing women. A good portion of them are African Americans who are moving into the cities, and 70% of American working women were servants. And so because of this, they have more opportunities available to them because they're working, they have their own income, and they really felt that they should have a say in how that income is spent. Within the industries, within the businesses of the cities, 25% of women are 25% of the workforce in industry were women who were working in manufacturing. And as more and more businesses become available, there's more and more white-collar jobs that are open for women, like secretarial jobs, clerical jobs, stenographers, filing clerks, all kinds of stuff that they're able to do. So as these women gain more and more independence and they gain more and more financial stability, they are going to begin to fight for the right to vote. And the right to vote is called suffrage. So we get the women's suffrage movement. And we have Susan B. Anthony. And Susan B. Anthony actually was very opposed to the 14th and 15th Amendments, which extended voting rights to African Americans and people of color. But she is opposed to that because it does not mention women. And she felt that women should be included in that if African Americans, as a substandard group of people prior to the Civil War, should get their right to vote, so should women. And so she's going to help create NAWSA, NAWSA, which is the National American Women's Suffrage Association. And it's working towards women's suffrage. And she had a three-part strategy. Ugh, can't talk anymore today. Three-part strategy. The first is to convince the state legislatures to give women the right to vote. So she's starting at the state level, getting states to do it. And the territory of Wyoming will be the first to give women the right to vote. The second is to pursue court cases about the 14th Amendment. So she goes after these court cases that are going to challenge the 14th Amendment and basically try to answer the question of whether or not women were considered citizens. If African Americans could be considered citizens, why can't women? And the Supreme Court is going to decide that yes, they are citizens, but that does not automatically give them the vote. So the third strategy, or the third part of her strategy, is to push for a constitutional amendment to get that passed. And at first it's not very successful. So it's going to take a little while before she actually is able to get that going.